First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to have this talk about basically, chess in Soweto, and also to talk about my father in the late 70s, 80s, early 90s. And I also want to repeat what David said that it actually happened when I was reflecting on that time, and I was actually quite amazed how political and strenuous the time was. Reflecting on it as an adult, I was sort of like shaking my head and saying, "Wow! I mean, I cannot believe that this and this happened." As I relate the stories, obviously, because it is going to be about, chess in Soweto and players from Soweto playing outside of Soweto and so on. So it might get a little bit uncomfortable for most of the guys, but it happened. And, so I'm just going to relate it as I remember it. Okay. So basically, the reason why, in my analysis, why chess became pretty strong in Soweto was because many of the guys who started, this was, obviously they started being very much interested after the Fischer-Spassky match, or rather during that match, 1972, as the rest of the world, got interested. And many of the players, I mean, my father included, they were actually drafts players at that time. They used to play drafts, and the little I know of drafts, because they still played even when they were playing chess. They were still playing drafts, and the method that they would use in drafts was there was something called a set. So if you were playing against somebody, you didn't play one game, you played to 6, and then it was written in a book. Everyone kept the book, and then there was something, then there were different levels. There was A level players, was like a ladder system, A level. So someone would say, no, I'm not going to play you. You are a C, I'm an A, and first you have to play the guys in B and things like that. And that same attitude actually filtered through into chess. Many of the guys who played chess in Soweto were formerly drafts players. Well, at least the core members. Many of them from the Eastern Cape. So, my earliest memory of chess in Soweto, I started playing when I was 4, and the reason why I started playing so young was because I had 2 elder sisters who were 4 years and 2 years older than I was, and because the guys would sometimes play at home as well, and my dad, we showed interest by watching and so on, and then before long, I don't even remember when I was taught how to play chess, but somewhere I got hold of chess, and we sort of started, and as I said, it was always it was an environment where you couldn't sort of play against any player. You actually had different levels, and you could only play against these specific players and so on till you could beat them, and so on. So my earliest, it was big in Orlando. So everything happened in Soweto, and there's a section in Soweto called Orlando, and there was a place called the DOCC, which was a big hall in Soweto, and that's where everyone played. So everyone from around Soweto would go there to play. There's one character that I who comes to mind, because he was from Soweto, and later on in his place, it was sort of like a club that even in the late 90s was still there. It was Mr. Pato. Mr. Pato was he was actually an actor first, and if you hear many stories about many South African artists, singers, and so on, and mainly those who went overseas. They acted in King Kong, which was a play, that was big then, and he actually acted there, and he was supposed to travel as well, and I didn't get the story right. Something happened, but he didn't end up traveling. But Mr. Pato was actually, very, very intelligent, but I think educationally he went up to standard 2, because of the times there, then. And they used to sort of, they would tease him when they were playing, and they would say, "Oh, now I'm playing against the standard 2," they would say something like that. But Mr. Pato was very witty, and actually, he would respond, because he was working at Coca-Cola, and he would say, "Well, I'm going to trick you as the same way I tricked the whites at Coca-Cola when I actually convinced them that I've got a metric, even though I end up in standard, I finished in standard 2, So it was a situation like that where you had the players always talking and playing. Basically that was the situation. A lot of friendly games, a lot of playing in people's houses before it was formalized. And then there was at that moment one tournament that was in Soweto. It used to be, I think, around June. It was the Standard Bank chess tournament. It actually was played inside a bank. And I remember the top boards used to be, the chains, the bank chains, they used to coordinate off, the top 4 boards or so. And at that stage, the player who was dominating chess in South Africa was a certain gentleman by the name of Ismail Dlalisa. I will show a game of his later on to just show you how strong he was and how talented this player was. I mean, the game I'm going to show later on, his rating in 1980 was 1820, which was a very decent level for this guy. He had never been to school, I think, but he obviously self-taught. He had a very good command of the English language, but he didn't read many chess books. He was very, very much a natural player, but extremely strong. So I remember one very funny, story, and that was the Dlalisas. It wasn't only Ishmael playing, actually. There was a couple of brothers, and they had cousins as well. And they were very strong. I think the weakest player must have been maybe around 1650 at that time. It was a whole group of brothers and cousins, and they had a tree, and just outside their home. And every time you wanted to play, you'd play under the tree, and you'd start playing against the weakest guy there, and you'd have to, before you played Ishmael, and it was quite tough. I mean, I myself tried when I was a youngster, and it was so tough. I actually never got to play Ishmael under the tree, so I never got to him. I was stopped always, along the way there. Then fast forward to the Standard Bank chess tournament, and I just want to paint the picture of the environment that was then, So this must have been probably in the late 70s, probably 78, 79. And I remember there were characters that were there in chess. So you have to understand basically sort of the township approach to sports. If you are very good, you will be given a nickname, of course. So if you are good in soccer, for example, when South Africa won the Cup of Nations, we had a player whose nickname was Dunga. John Mweti, his name was Dunga. The nickname was from the Brazilian, Dunga, who was good in the, you have guys like Drogba now, so you'll always be given a certain nickname. And it wasn't different in chess. I remember 2 characters. There was one player, his name was Spassky, and the other guy's name was Fish and Chips. So I'm going to explain why he was called Fish and Chips. So Spassky was a colorful character. I mean, during the tournament, because you have to, in Soweto you had different sections. So, you had guys in one section, they would have their champion, a guy who was always beating them. So they thought he was, as strong as the world champion. He was Spassky. I mean, he was unbeatable. And when the tournament started, you could actually see them, So Spassky would come with a white suit and a white hat, a very big white hat. And he had an entourage of supporters, who were convinced that he's going to win this tournament. And the other guy's name was Fish and Chips. And the reason why it was called Fish and Chips is because, if you, well, in the township, if you're like sort of hanging around and you say, okay, let's get something to eat, you'd normally get fish and chips and you'd put it on the steps of the shop, the shopping complex, and everyone would stand around there and pick the chips, obviously, so you'd have a group of guys standing and picking the chips like that, eating. So Fish and Chips, this play was called Fish and Chips because when he used to play, if an opponent made a mistake, so the tournament hall is completely quiet, everyone is thinking, Fish and Chips would go like this, with his hand to the air to attract attention. So obviously everyone is going to get up and then go to see what's going on, and then he would rub his hands together, like that, and then he would go like that with his hand, and then he would stand up and he would take the night, like that. So that's how he got his nickname, Fish and Chips. And everyone was scared to play Fish and Chips, of course, because if you ever played against Fish and Chips, it would be a spectacle. Everyone would know, you played against Fish and Chips. Anyway, yeah, that was basically the tournament scene. There was one tournament, which was the Standard Bank event. Then on my own progress, because I was playing against adults actually from the word go. My sisters sort of, okay, they played, but they were not too interested. They were not too competitive. It didn't matter to them whether they won or not. But actually, on a side note, in 1987, Mark Levitt was already, had become SA champion, and he played one event in Soweto. And actually my sister Constance crushed him in the second round. I mean, he didn't blunder, he was crushed. And he was already like 2,100, so yeah, I think they could actually have been good players, but they didn't really, were very interested in taking it further. But okay, I was, and for a number of reasons. I mean, first of all, I was sort of in this, I had these different worlds, on every time I go to sleep, I would be dreaming about that tree in Orlando and getting to Ishmael, Lalisa, when am I gonna get to this guy? And on the other hand, I had, Mr. Pato and all these other guys I was trying to beat. So very early on, I started sort of getting hold of opening books because I realized that this is the only way I was going to beat these guys. They had started playing way before me. And if I continued playing normally, there was no way I was ever going to beat them. So I started sort of looking for, so I remember looking at the Queen's Gambit, like you give a pawn, the player takes, and they cannot get it back. And if they try to hold on to the pawn, you get their rook and things like that, these tricks. So I started looking at these various tricks. And actually, but one player who I started playing, sort of, he started having some kind of respect, and we would play some friendly games, was actually Ishmael Lalisa. And, that's when I started sort of as well improving, and I'll go back to what happened afterwards, but I just wanted to show you, to give you an idea of what kind of a player Ishmael Lalisa was. This game was played in 1980, okay? And Ishmael Lalisa was playing against Clyde Wolpe. Now Clyde Wolpe was a good player who became SA champion. And actually he did coach me for maybe about 6-7 months, Clyde, at one stage. Yeah, they played this in 1980, and Clyde was about 2021-10, and Ishmael was 1980. But I want to show you the game. I looked at the game now, and I was very impressed with the game, because Ismail Jalisa's play reminded me of Mikhail Chigorin. Now, Chigorin played against Steinitz, the first world champion. He played twice actually, but he lost. But he was a very natural player as well and very original, and he could play the whole board, So you'll see what I mean. So, okay, let's look at this game very quickly. So, Clyde plays c4. Can you see? Okay, so he plays knight f6, knight c3, e6. Clyde plays e4. All right, so here normally, because white is threatening to get hold of the center, normally black should play d5 or c5. Those are the two moves, but okay, Ismail just wanted to develop his pieces, plays bishop b4. So Clyde plays e5. And already you can tell, there's like some kind of understanding, because after e5, it's clear that, Ismail wants to move his knight, but this is a player who's playing just naturally. So he realized, okay, the knight is probably going to go to e4 because, the pawn is moved. And so let me take this knight off before it can get to e4. So takes back, and then he plays knight back to g8. Okay, so he's not too worried because at least he sees, okay, the pawns are a little bit ruined. He can move the knight out and castle. And Clyde, being a very aggressive player, realized that the pawn on e5 stops the black pieces from coming out, decides that he's going to play queen g4. Why not? It's a very good move. Similar idea is in the French variation and so on, attacking g7. Yeah. So obviously, if g6 is played, bishop g5, h4, and maybe bishop f6, and it's going to end very quickly. So Ismail plays king f8. Okay. He doesn't really mind. Clyde plays h4. He plays h5. Queen f4. And here in this position, I mean, I found the next move very interesting. It's for me a sign of a player who's aware of all the pieces on the board, because a normal player will develop his knight h6 or something like this, but yeah, he's sort of worried about his queenside pieces, and he decides that he's going to play d6 to get his pieces out as well. So he wants to get all his pieces in the game immediately. So Clyde plays knight f3, knight h6, bishop e3, so knight c6. Obviously white is better in this position, castle's long. d6 is under attack, so knight f5. Okay, the knight is quite strong here. Clyde plays bishop e3. Bishop d3 to exchange the knight. Knight takes e3, f takes e3, and plays queen e7. So queen e7 is worried about his pawn on d6. Should the bishop move, he wants to get out of the pin on the d. Rook h f1, normal move. He's putting pressure on f7. So now, if you look at black's position, actually, okay, it's relatively solid. But the only problem is that his three pieces are not moving. The rook on h8, the rook on a8, and the bishop on c8. So, yeah, okay. So we can actually see that Ismail is having this, is thinking along the same lines. For me, it's like, if you were to imagine, I can see these ideas because of what I've studied, through the years, the games, the ideas. But remember, he's playing naturally. This is a player who's never read a chess book, really. He's figuring it out. So he plays here, for me, an exclamation mark move, for a player who, without a lot of chess history behind him. He plays rook h6. It's quite a strong move, so now he hasn't castled, and he understands that. So castling to him is not about king safety. It's also about king safety, but it's also about the rook getting involved. You can start to see a lot of understanding. So he thinks, okay, my king on f8 is safe. My only problem is that the rook is not playing. So let's play rook h6 and get the rook into the game. Very, very nice move. At this stage, Clyde, probably this is a mistake to take on d6. I don't think it's necessary for him to take here, but okay, doesn't matter. E takes d6, c takes d6, and plays bishop e4. So he's trying to cash in immediately, trying to get the pawn on d6. But now Ismail gets exactly what he wants. He wants to get the bishop into the game. So he plays e5. defending the pawn on d6 and opening up for the bishop. Clyde plays queen g3, bishop e6. After bishop e6, Clyde plays c5. Now, you know, yeah, it looks very good for white. You know, c5 and the king is in the center. But now all of a sudden, Ismail plays bishop takes a2. Now we see, you know, two pieces at the same time playing. Number one, the king is now starting to be unsafe. And number two, the rook on h6 protects d6 very nicely. This is amazing. I mean, it's like, you know, he's controlling the whole board, all the pieces sort of playing. Okay, so here Clyde takes on d6. Maybe not the best decision. Okay, fine. Rook takes d6, takes on d6, queen takes d6, and he cannot resist getting this pawn. Probably he should just play rook d1, but okay, I can understand why he takes on c6. Takes back, queen takes e5, and now queen d3. So the rook is attacked, and all of a sudden we have a threat. Queen check. If rook d1, queen b1 check, and rook d8, and queen takes b2, you know, it's starting to be very unclear. So he plays knight d2, and here after knight d2 comes rook d8. So now all the pieces are playing. Rook f2, and now a very nice move. Bishop b3. So now the thing is that, of course, the knight cannot take because of mate, but this also means that, you know, the a file is starting to be weak as well. You know, there are ideas where the rook can maybe go to a5. Queen c2 is a threat, of course, because you take in rook d1. Yes. So bishop b3 is a very strong move. So he plays queen f5, so that he can take back with the rook. And now he plays queen takes e3, and it's all over. You know, he's pinned. He's threatening mate. I mean, so this for me is okay. The game is not correct per se, but if you are looking at the quality of the player and the talent, you know, the ability to think out of the box, it's an amazing game for me. You know, very, very nice game. So yeah, that was the type of player that Ismail Lalisa was, and this game was played, you know, in 1980. So all right, then afterwards, in 1981 was an interesting year, because in 81 I was 8 years old, and I qualified to play for Southern Transvaal primary school tournament team. This was very interesting because in 1981 it's at the height of apartheid, and it's actually very interesting to make the link to what David was saying, because now I was the player on the other side. So we had to travel to Port Elizabeth. So first problem, how to get there. So they write to Pretoria and they ask for a special permit to allow me to go into the train so that I can travel with the rest of the team. Okay, I think it takes a little bit of maneuvering and so on, but they get this going. So they allow me to travel on the same compartment, basically, as the rest of the team. So I'm the only black player there. So my dad sees potential threats in this situation and decides he's going to come with. It's probably not a good idea, probably. So I remember so we get there, and I've got this now Southern Transvaal. All the teams used to have different uniform. You know, Southern Transvaal had red and white. And so I get there, and as we get into the train, I remember this very big Afrikaans gentleman with his family, and you know, he had the full regalia. You know, the brown shorts, of course, the socks all the way up to here, and the comb. You know, so he was ready, and so I remember like it was yesterday. So the first thing he says to us is, "Okay, sorry guys, you're in the wrong compartment." So we're looking at this guy, and before we could answer him, like a whole group of other team members started arriving. So I remember the look on this guy's face. He was so confused because he looked at me. You know, I had this uniform, and the other white guys had the same uniform. Then he realized, what's going on here? So this is like some team or something. Okay, so he stands on the side. And so we start moving to the different compartments. So we go into this compartment with my dad, and this guy, he waited for us. So we go into this compartment, he goes to the next compartment, right next to us. So he's right there with his family. So I remember, okay, so there's two of us, okay, the train moves. So as soon as we start talking, just normal, he's boom, 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 because what's with this guy? Okay. And okay, it goes, and then we start talking again, and the guy, boom, 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 So his idea is to make the trip as uncomfortable as possible for us, of course. Okay. So somehow, I remember this idea, there are a number of, it's amazing that I remember nothing. I don't remember what my mom said to me. I don't remember what happened when we left, but I remember this, like, I remember the colors, I remember everything about this, because for me it was like, it was my first taste of apartheid, and I was like, what is this? What is this guy? What does he want? I'm only 8. Okay, that was not too bad. I don't remember what happened, so it means nothing bad happened. So we get to the tournament and we're playing. So we have a free day. And in the free day, it means that, of course, we have to go out. So we go to the beach because, we are from Gauteng and, we're in PE and everyone wants to go to the beach, of course. So we go to the beach. So there I am having fun with my short trunks, my teammates. I'm 8. I know the guys, but, okay, we're talking to the guys. And before I know it, I'm actually in the air. I'm thinking to myself, why am I in the air? So I turn around, and there's this big guy, and he's got me by the trunks, like this. So I'm kicking around, and I look at this guy. And so now, all the mothers of the other teammates are terrified, like what's going to happen now? So they come running, and there's like a big commotion. And this big guy, I remember like yesterday, he says, if we let this kafir swim here, all the kafirs are going to come from the township and start swimming here. Whoa. That was the first time I ever heard this name, and actually mentioned to me like directly, like, wow, what's going on here? So after this, of course, I understood immediately what's going on. And for me, I don't remember the games. I remember that it was fine, but it was for me so traumatic that every time after that, when my teammates went for outings, I told my dad, no, I'm staying in the room, no more, So we actually stayed in the room the whole day, and we're playing chess. So that was for me, the 1981 was very significant year because it was sort of like a baptism of fire. I started sort of to be introduced to what country I'm actually living in. It doesn't matter if you can play chess and so on. It doesn't matter. Okay. So this was actually 1981. And then this was one of it was an important event because it actually leads my dad in the right direction, so to speak, because my dad, after this, he realizes that the only way for me and anyone else to play is for us to create a black team so that at least, no one feels left out, So this is 1981. And then the next important event happens because what we used to do at that time, we used to travel to tournaments. My dad and I used to travel to tournaments to play, but it was nothing that I remember. Let's put it that way. But there was always incidents. One player doesn't want to shake your hand, okay, so you crush him, and things like that. Like we're parking, and then someone comes, and you cannot drive out. And I remember some guys, hitting the car with chains. Okay, but it's nothing, drastic. But one incident happened. We played a tournament. I remember it was in Holiday Inn. I don't remember which suburb it was. It must have been around 1982. But what happens is that there were probably 5 black players playing, because it was myself, my sister, my dad, a certain gentleman, I forgot, but he was a vendor, very neat guy, and another chap. Now this gentleman, he actually came back the following round, and he had a stitch on top of the head. He was sort of swollen, and it was like, what happened, And he relates, no, I mean, he was going home, and all of a sudden the police came and, just for no reason at all, they just hit him on the head. And actually, the following day, this guy actually goes to hospital and he passes away. So I remember the whole tournament, we actually had to give him a standing ovation. They actually say, I forgot his name, they say, oh, Mr. So-and-so actually passed away from the injuries that he got. So everyone is standing away, like moment of silence, we're like, what's going on? And I think these two incidents sort of start, highlighting to my dad that, okay, the only way that I'm ever going to improve in chess is if something is organized in Soweto. This is the only way. Outside of Soweto, it's not possible. So I think due to these incidences, my dad formed in 1985 the Central Transvaal Chess Club. So the Central Transvaal Chess Club, well, maybe he formed it around, I don't know when, 84, 83, but I know 85 because in 85, that's when I was in high school and that's when I played Board 1 for the Central Transvaal Chess Club. And now the Central Transvaal Chess Club, we actually had just a number of like strong black players only. And I have a very nice, well, I don't know if it's nice, but a very interesting story to relate about this. And I actually met a gentleman by the name of Charles Fourie, who later on became a very good friend of mine. Charles, he actually has left to Australia with his family. And I met him in Pretoria. This is years later, when I was staying in Pretoria, and okay, I didn't remember who he was. I said, oh, okay, then of course we kicked off, yeah. And we became friends again. And he said to me something very, very significant for that time point. He says to me, gee whiz, okay, so we're having a beer, and he says, you know what, just out of the blue, he says, do you guys remember when you guys played Orange Free State? And I'm like, yeah, we crushed you guys. I mean, it was a massacre. I mean, the only teams we could play, okay, Southern Transvaal, and Western Province were the teams that were strong. There were other teams, but I mean, okay, maybe in 85 I was already maybe 1800, possible. And there were other players who were actually, probably around, our weakest player must have been around 1500. So we were quite okay. And but Charles told me something fascinating. He says to me, when we played you, my world came upside down. I didn't, he says I was dazed. I said, what do you mean? What do you mean you were dazed? He says, well, I grew up in a small dorpy in the Free State. And he says, yeah, when you grow up, you ask questions. You ask your dad, what's going on? And he says, well, my parents always told me, look, the black guys, they're like kids, They're very slow. They cannot really think on their own. That's why they cannot vote, telling him as his son. Oh, yeah, okay. And he says, actually, this was justified by the fact that the maid, he says he remembers strictly because they were one day going to go on a vacation to Cape Town from the Free State. And the maid asked them, well, how are you going there? And they said, well, we're going to drive, And the maid, he says he remembered, the maid said, but isn't the car going to get tired? It's so far in Cape Town. Isn't the car going to get tired? And he said, yeah, okay. To him, that was the world. The only guys he was in touch with were guys who were working in his garden. There was his maid, and this was the world. So they go to play in the event in 1985, and they made this team with 10 black players from Soweto. I mean, nothing, no private school, no normal boys from Soweto, And we wiped the floor with them. And not only do we wipe the floor with them, but in analysis he says he couldn't believe it, We start sort of teaching them, like, don't you know, this and that was written about that, you can play this move, this is. So he says, afterwards, he was dazed. He actually saw that there's something wrong with his world, that this cannot be. This is not a fluke. They were crushed, and how is this possible? So I found that very interesting. That was around 19 85. And around this time, actually, it was very interesting time because in 85, so yeah, we sort of get the idea of why my dad actually creates the Central Transvaal Chess Union. And but just on the side note, just to show you how life was like in Soweto at this time. This is obviously the height of the riots. I mean, I became very strong in 1986. And the reason I became strong in 1986 was basically because I was a chess professional. Because in 86, I couldn't go to school. Because, you go to school, this was the daily routine. You go to school, you sit in the class, and all of a sudden, tear gas canisters fly in. There's a whole panic. Everyone is trying to run. People are being beaten by the police. Some are taken to jail. You're running for your life. You get home. And tomorrow you do it again. And, because why the picture is like that is because that's exactly how it was in my head, because I was in standard 6. So you have limited understanding of what is going on. All you know is that, okay, the sport is go to school, till there's a tear gas canisters, don't get caught by these guys, these Afrikaans guys, run for your life, get home, and let's see what happens tomorrow. So, of course, we lost a year in 86 because it got really bad. And in 86, it was rough. There was state of emergency. You couldn't get out of Soweto. You couldn't get out of your house at a specific time. It was rough. And that's when I actually improved a lot in chess, because I sort of dived into chess and started studying chess. But what was interesting was that, what David actually talks about, it's actually very interesting because it's like from two different worlds, but the same country. But it's the same influences, sort of. Because when we were playing in 85, of course, we would go to the library to get books. And generally, the guys who were playing chess, even at the club, because, life was different from what it was now, from what it is now in Soweto, because you have to remember that everyone was in one township, so you had, guys who were, very intelligent and actually well educated, time allowing, who were in this space, and everyone was in the same space. And actually, a lot of very intellectual guys were playing chess. The discussions were always very, there were political discussions. There were all kinds of discussions that were happening. And actually, what was funny is that around this time in 1985, I'm just going to highlight this because it was actually significant. In 1985, we actually lost 3 players who went underground to the ANC. Trevor Konela, Tebucho Padu, and AB. Forgot what AB's surname was. And the funny thing was that I remember, because they used to come from Tembisa, and when they came to Soweto, they would obviously stay at my father's place, and we would train chess, for either the weekend or holidays. And I remember once Elijah trying to recruit me to go over to the ANC, and so here was this pitch. It was actually very interesting. So already then we knew, politically, like much more than I would say, needed to be, because we already knew about the 4 pillars of the ANC and all everything, basically, not everything, but everything that one got from the radio signal that guys used to hack into in the country. And we were too afraid to listen to it, of course, because if the cops detected the signal, you could get arrested, things like that. But I remember he says to me, "Gee, you know what? Because we knew a lot about the Soviet Union, because from chess, reading about Potvinnik's memoirs, how life was like, and we kind of already, in my head, I already understood, because for example, Potvinnik writes why, because he was Jewish, and already at school he was being teased because he was Jewish and so on. So he highlighted this part in the Soviet Union as well. And for me, reading it as a South African, it was easy to connect. You know, it was easy for me to understand the situation, because I was almost in the same situation. Well, actually, not almost. I was actually in a worse situation than he was in. But yeah, so we actually got a lot of material just to understand life in the Soviet Union, because at that moment you have to understand that, well, the Soviet Union in Soweto, we understood they are supporting the ANC and the guys are getting training, and that's it. You know, the Soviet Union is the place to be if you want to go anywhere. So then he says to me, you know what, Watu? You know, you should come with, you know, because already the two had already skipped the country. And he says, well, I'm going, you know. So this was very, I mean, normally no one would ever tell this to you because it could endanger their lives. But now he was trying to recruit me. So I said, yeah, but what? He says, look, it's very easy. Okay, so his sales pitch, which actually almost got me, he says, you'll go to Zambia, and in Zambia they're going to simply ask you, because you're still a kid. I mean, we're kids. They're going to ask you what you want to be, okay? And all you say to them is that you want to be working with the KGB as an agent, but you want to be based in Moscow. And they're going to say to you, okay, take him to Moscow. And you're going to fly to Moscow, and guess what, Watu? You can go meet Botvinnik. I'm like, yes, like, man, oh man. I can actually go get to meet Botvinnik. I could meet Botvinnik, man. Could get some training from Botvinnik as well. This is very, very interesting. So, yeah, okay, but yeah, needless to say, I mean, yeah, well, you know, afterwards he did, you know, AB skip the country, but yeah, we never got that far. And okay, so then life went on. So in 1986, my dad started to organize many events, which is understandable due to the climate that was like, you know. So for him, it was clear, you know. He saw, okay, I love playing chess. I'm always studying chess. I'm always every time you see me, I'm just playing chess somewhere. And so he decides that, okay, he's gonna have to organize events in Soweto so that I can get to play. So he organizes events in a place called Funda Center. Now Funda Center is very close to at that stage it's impossible to get into Soweto if you are white. It's basically, it's impossible. So he talks to the guys, you know, there in Soweto, and so the idea is that whoever is going to play in Funda Center, they're just going to go in, not necessarily all the way into Soweto, and then they'll play in Funda Center, and then afterwards they can move out. And I remember that actually he had a lot of you know, talks with many guys. He talked with, I don't know, taxi guys and this and that, and you know, just trying to sort of manage the situation if it ever got out of hand. But yeah, so that was around this time we had actually had the Tedelex tournament. Then afterwards, the Clover tournament, the Standard Bank tournament, the Coca-Cola tournament, the Odemiester tournament, all in Soweto. Basically, Soweto was transformed into the mecca of chess in South Africa. I mean, I remember one article was saying that Soweto is the capital of chess in South Africa because we were hosting 5 tournaments. Well, my dad was hosting 5 tournaments, and they were actually the highest paying tournaments in the country. Okay, the Twins Open was maybe with more prize fund, but those days you could play for 2 days and you could make 1,500, 2,000 rands, which was quite a lot of money by then. Yeah, so this was around 1988, and yeah, there were lots of events, and actually in 1989 I personally had my breakthrough year. Sort of won almost all the tournaments I played in 1989. But for me, it was actually very interesting because in '89 I got offered a scholarship to go to Germany. But before that, the problem was that you know, I was already in Standard 9, And of course, the next year I'm doing matric. But the problem was that I had to change schools because I was in Madibani High School, which was, you know, it was impossible to go there because we had so many activists, you know, so many student activists at the school. And I mean, I remember, I'll paint a picture that you will not believe. I was in a class. This was probably 1988. For maybe about 2 months, every time we went to class, we would go to class and there'd be 2 soldiers at the back with rifles inside the class to make sure, because they knew that, you know, there was a lot of information that was coming in. There were a lot of guys, you know, from the ANC who were infiltrating the country, posing as teachers, posing as students, you know. And I guess the government then was worried that if they didn't take the situation under control, it could explode and you could have so many people just moving out of the country to go for military training outside. So yeah, one of their ways was obviously just to get to the schools and to control the information that was coming. So around that time, you know, school was very uncomfortable actually, you know, so which made it probably easy for me to accept the scholarship to go to Germany. Because under normal circumstances, of course, if you are in standard 9, you will first want to do standard 10. I mean, I remember Eddie Price actually sitting down and advising me like, but why don't you first get your matric before you go? And I'm looking at it, I'm like, you know, I'm saying nothing, and I'm looking and I'm saying like, Eddie, why don't you come and spend 1 day at my school and see what you're gonna say after that? Okay. So so then after around that time, 1989, went over to Germany, and so at that time, my dad was already very much involved with developing chess. Basically, a very brief history about my dad. Yeah, okay, so he was born in the Eastern Cape, and he was actually, I mean, I'm not saying this only because he's my dad, but he was a very intelligent guy, you know, very, very practical. He was, you know, he knew how to get things done. You know, if he made his mind about something, he kind of knew how to get it going, and he was very, as you can tell, you know, from just listening to the snippets I gave you, he was very much goal orientated what he wants to do. But one of the things that I feel, you know, he was a little bitter, you know, as a man, because actually what he wanted to do, he wanted to become a medical doctor. And actually he was very good. I mean, he actually, he was more than capable of achieving that and more. But, well, because of the circumstances that he was growing up, you know, under, he was forced sort of to, after school, to go to Johannesburg and try to so his plan was sort of, okay, we'll get going and then we'll see, maybe I can raise some funds. But yeah, it never got to that because, you know, life happens and so on. And so he ended up working at the post office. And, you know, so obviously he was a very intelligent guy, and he climbed his way pretty quickly there. And yeah, so after he started organizing chess events, you know, that was just a little brief history, you know. You cannot understand everything, but at least you can understand his mentality, sort of, you know, whenever he's doing something. And after organizing these events, he obviously was starting to be more and more in line with because the tournaments at some stage, it also became pretty dangerous to host them in Soweto. So he moved the tournaments also to Wits University. Mark used to play a lot of those events, and so that they could be accessible. And after that, yeah, you know, I wasn't really very much in the country then, but so I cannot know the you know, step-by-step process. But he became the president of Chess South Africa, And but yeah, what was interesting to me is that he never, what's the word I'm looking for? He never tried very much to change the situation, because he knew that he couldn't change it. I mean, like when he was president, I think, he just knew that the situation is as is, and afterwards, he did more or less. I would say, in my mind, it did less when he was president of Chess South Africa than it did when he was not president, when he was organizing. But I guess it was seeing the limitations that were there, and just probably realizing that there isn't much that he could do. And sadly, for a long time, actually the only tournament that is there now in Soweto is the Welcome Pato Memorial Tournament, which happens every time in December. And but ever since Mr. Pato passed away, there is virtually no chess in Soweto. What he did when he retired, he turned his garage into a club. You were there many times, yeah? And it was one of the nicest places you could ever go to. Mr. Pato was an amazing character, and you'd have guys singing, you'd have all kinds of guys having their drinks and playing chess on the side. And I know that Nigel Short went there, Ramesh went there, Kogan went there. So a number of GMs went to Mr. Pato's place and actually played and enjoyed themselves there. And we'll just have to see when the next spark will come for chess in Soweto. Yeah, that was it.